the deal's not completed. And in the same way that I wouldn't ask the United States Senate or the American people to sign off on something before they've actually seen the details of it, and given that I'm not going to sign off on any deal until I've seen the details of it, I wouldn't expect them to either. What I did hear from our GCC partners was their agreement that if we can get a comprehensive, verifiable deal that cuts off the pathways to a nuclear weapon, that would be in their interests and the interests of the region as well as the world community. And so the question is then going to be, is Iran prepared to do what's required for the international community to feel confidence that, in fact, it's not developing a nuclear weapon? And have we set up the kinds of inspection regimes that allow such confidence to be maintained, not just next year or 5 years from now, but out into the future? So what we did was we had Secretary Kerry, Secretary Ernie Moniz, who obviously was involved in negotiations as well, to walk through why it was that we were confident that if the framework agreement we've arrived at were to be solidified, that in fact we could verify that they did not have a nuclear weapon. And that was important to them, and I think gave them additional confidence. There was a concern that I share, that even if we deal effectively with the nuclear issue, that we will still have a problem with some of Iran's destabilizing activities. And a number of them did express the concern that with additional resources through the reduction in sanctions, that was it possible that Iran would siphon off a lot of these resources into more destabilizing activity. Secretary Jack Lew was there to explain that, first of all, there would be no sanctions relief until we could confirm that Iran had actually carried out its obligations under any nuclear deal. Secondly, we gave them our best analysis of the enormous needs that Iran has internally and the commitment that Iran has made to its people in terms of shoring up its economy and improving economic growth. And as I pointed out, most of the destabilizing activity that Iran engages in is low-tech, low-cost activity. And so part of my emphasis to them was that if we are focusing more effectively on the things we need to do to shore up defenses, improve intelligence, improve the capacity for maritime monitoring of what's taking place in the Gulf, if we are working in concert to address, the terrorist activity and countering terrorist messages that are coming not just from state sponsors like Iran, but more broadly from organizations like ISIL, then we're going to be able to fortify ourselves and deal with many of these challenges much more effectively, and we can do so from a position of strength and confidence. So it's not to deny the concerns that were there about what happens when sanctions are reduced, but it was to emphasize that what matters more is the things that we can do now to ensure that some of this destabilizing activity is no longer taking place. And of course, when you look at a place like Yemen, the issue there is that the state itself was crumbling, and that if we can do a better job in places like Syria, Yemen, Libya, in building up functioning political structures, then it's less likely that anybody, including Iran, can exploit some of the divisions that exist there.